A very warm welcome to you all. Welcome to Designing Cities for All.
The 2-year activity program of Blijf,
in which we take a deep dive into designing products,
places and systems for all.
At every level, we can see certain communities being marginalized, being taken advantage of, and it's all part of the design.
When you're neurodiverse, you're in a world that isn't designed for you.
We're not the only species on the planet. The city needs to be also a city for the other species.
And we need to do something because the old structures in which we worked don't work.
Things won't change just if we just let things happen.
Instead of saying, what can we do to mitigate the impacts? We need to start asking ourselves, what is causing that?
Design is political, that we need to design processes, that we are all different, but there are things that unite us.
These are the things that need to be on the table, that need to be recovered in order to redesign the society.
Everything around us was once designed and can therefore be redesigned.
How do we teach design in a way where students can be really critical of the systems of power that have informed and dominated design?
Inclusion happens by design or not at all.
I think it's always some kind of a co-creation process, and you have to make very little steps and then figure out together what works and what doesn't.
it takes as much time to do something good as it takes time to do something bad.
All design tells a story.
But there's also a bit of a need to not just write ourselves into the past, but also kind of write ourselves into the future.
I invite you so much to join my path of liberation, and I'm hopefully being welcomed by your path of liberation.
We have to heal collectively. We have to help each other understand some of these constructs that actually divide us.
Not fitting in was a blessing, or I would have turned out just like you.
Hello and a very warm welcome to you all from Podcast Zwijger. Thank you for joining us either through live streaming online and the people that are joining us here in the studio. The video that you just watched showed the wrap-up of the first 2 years of Designing Cities for All, which is a research and activity program that takes a deep dive into designing places, products, and systems for all. We started in 2021, and the first 2 years was finished. But then in 2023, we started again with the sub-theme of regenerative design. And we do that with 6 DCFA fellows, and we make different programs under a series of programs that we call them fellowships. The one that we are currently doing, it's called Redesigning Connection. And we are partnering up with a community hub based in Tokyo that's called Shibaura House. And our aim is to learn more about how we can redesign cities in a way that recovers and strengthens the systems in it so that people and everything beyond humans can bloom. So that was the main difference with the first edition that we had. My name is Faiza Mohammadi. I'm the program lead of DCFA, and tonight I'm also moderating the program. Thanks for joining us. So tonight, you're here for the program of the communities of DenCity. That was a term that we coined ourselves, which is, of course, the combination of dense and cities. And we want to explore practical strategies and innovative approaches for reviving the lost connections that we used to have in our cities, but then with this rapid urbanization and the modern lifestyle, we tend to lose a lot of them, but both at individual and also like collective levels, and to foster a more inclusive city for and with everyone. So stay with us, and I want to welcome our guests who joined us both through Zoom and also sitting with me here in the studio. First of all, I want to have a round of applause for all of them so people can hear us. So I will first introduce Petra Heck, who is sitting next to me. She's a curator at Stichting NDSM Werf, and we will talk about her projects and what they're doing there a bit more. We are also having online speakers joining us. First is Jose Richard Avile. They are equitable transportation planner analysts at Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley, and also an urban planner, but also a social worker and also a performance artist. Joining all the way from Mexico City currently, but based in LA. And also we have Madoka Minamisawa from Japan, and she's the culture program coordinator at Shibaura House, and later you will see them on the screen behind me when we're gonna start the program. Unfortunately, one of our speakers couldn't join us because she got sick, Minushe Besters. She was supposed to be here tonight with us, but because of sickness, they were not able to join. And last but not least, we have Madoka to present the Life project on behalf of the organization. They are a service provider company for a variety of lifestyle solutions. I guess later we will understand what do they do exactly. And so yeah, that was my short intro. The only thing that's left is that we want to include you in our conversation. So please, if you have a question, wait for the Q&A part, and then my colleague will come to you with a mic, and you can pose your question to either of the speakers, or just add a comment, or just share what you think. Also, for people who are joining online and watching us online, you can go to menti.com and insert the code 16553865. I'm going to repeat it one more time. It's 16553865. And there you can just put your question or add your comment, and I will receive it here, and we can share it with the speakers and audiences here. So I don't think I left anything. Let's start. Maybe another round of applause to make it more like a start. Thank you. Okay, Petra, thank you so much for being here tonight with us. You are a curator at Stichting NDSM Werf, and in short, NDSM is a neighborhood in Amsterdam North, and there are a lot of cool and fun projects happening there. Can you give us a bit more information about your personal background, about NDSM and what you're doing there?
Yeah, I've been working there for now 5 years, and maybe to put it a little bit more in context, NDSM is not really a neighborhood, or it's actually a neighborhood becoming to be into existence, because it used to be a ship wharf. So it was a large ship wharf in the 50s, the biggest in Europe actually, and it went bankrupt in 1984. Then after a little bit, like a lot of pioneering artists came and some restaurants, and more it got busy actually with companies. Yeah, a lot of the industry got moved at a certain point, like in the 30s, to the banks, the water banks of the north. Because it got so crowded in the city center, they moved all the industry, and behind that they actually installed these neighborhoods, inspired on the English ones, the town cities, tuinsteden. So like Tuindorp Ozaan, that was actually, yeah, planned and built for the employees for the ship wharf. So that was actually the first neighborhoods in relation to the ship wharf, to all the employees. And since then, like since the 80s, 90s, 2000s, until recent, a lot of new additions were built to that in different decades. And now actually it's coming closer and closer. And also on the west side of NDSM, like a lot of new high-rise apartments are being built. So there are, last couple of years, like around 5,000 people are living there, and it will end up in like 10,000 people. So it's really a growing neighborhoods, but NDSM that we take care of and curate is not a neighborhood that people actually live. It's only to work at, so a lot of artists, companies, restaurants. And we as a foundation, we curate, program, and take care of just the public space. So we don't own or don't take care of any buildings. It's about 10 acres. Well, here you can see one of the images during a festival. We have the mission to make, keep NDSM into a public space that is not exclusive to a certain audience. And we try to be as polyphonic as possible. And we try to do that by 3 different things. So we organize a diverse range of events and festivals. So like large-scale dance festivals. This is an image of a second-hand market that's in wintertime taking place in one of the warehouses. But that's an installation that we installed there. So we had also an exhibition in the warehouse, but normally we program outside. And this is an image of the Concertgebouw, so a classical free concert. The opening nights took place, was really, really popular. But we also organized like King's Day, which has like the largest kids markets in Amsterdam, with a lot of local communities coming up, like the Capoeira school and local music school performances. So that's also a free event. There are like small-scale theater festivals. And then we have our own art programming that I am like responsible for. And then the art programming, here you see like an image of the King's Day, but in the back you see the container arch, and that has been a commission together with a digital art festival, and it was by Xu Yang Xu. And she, for instance, she wrote like empower, so she really wanted to empower the LGBTQI plus community, because she is also from that community and from Chinese background, but living in Amsterdam. So we do like a very diverse programming in that sense, to have all these different moments, different events, different festivals. And this, for instance, will be there for like almost a year. So it really differs in how we approach it, basically.
Yeah, I also know that there are a lot of community-based programs and projects that are happening at NDSM, like Leave a Space for a Space. I guess we also have some visuals of that. Can you explain a bit more what's the difference between these kind of festivals that you usually organize and people attend to improve the sense of community with those community-led programs that people of the area are part of the program?
Yeah. So, and there's also a little bit in between. So we also have, like, for instance, the NDSM Open Call, which is an open call for NDSM-based artists. So some programs are a little bit in between. And like the Young Curator program that we organized together with Rose Stories this year for the first time for younger audiences. But this is really like a project that we had 4 workshops together with, in total, like 100 participants. And this is by Morak Mayesko, who's like a British artist. And we, together with her, wanted to have this installation on the sense of belonging and what it actually means. And then she thought, okay, because it's such a changing area, but also like a terrain where a lot of things are happening, it's close to the water and wind. I want to have like lots of mobile elements, and then also involve like a lot of people. And we thought, okay, we want to really have like new inhabitants and also old inhabitants living in Tuindorp Oostzaan and anything maybe in between. And so she led the workshops. We also had like a Dutch workshop leader who has a studio at NDSM. So she really knows the context and she knows how to work with different kinds of people. And she speaks Dutch, which was also like a really important element. And then she had different questions. And in the end, like a collage was part of it, but also like making a sort of spoken word. So what do you actually feel and sense and smell when you're feeling, or when you have the feeling of being at home, or somewhere where you belong. And then in the end, it really worked out to have like different groups of people and different inhabitants, both from the new apartment buildings and also from the older neighborhoods. And in the end, the artist, she selected some words that she thought were like crucial within these workshops, and they ended up in the installation. So you can see, like, I see invisible people, past, present, and future overlap together, but not yet touching. So some were a little bit more edgy, or more like going into a sort of friction, which was also one part, I think, of the workshop. And others were and like navigating alone. There was also a gay couple, for instance, in one of the new apartment buildings, who felt like really lonely. So don't having that sense of belonging yet in these new apartment buildings.
Yeah, I guess like belonging and improving the sense of belonging is one of those topics in urban studies, or generally, that still needs a lot of improvement. Like, while it has been like more of an overused term and we have used it a lot, but still there is a lot to discover. I guess we will come back to this project later when we are doing the panel discussion, but thank you for now. I would like to move on to the next speaker, Jose Richard. Can you hear us? If yes, I would like to, okay, perfect. I guess we will have your face soon on the screen. By that time, I would like to introduce you. Thank you so much. Joining us all the way from Mexico right now. You are an equitable transportation planner analyst, but at the same time, you are wearing a lot of other hats, among which I can mention urban planner and social worker, and also an artist. How all of these connect together, and can you tell us a bit about your background and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, no, for sure. Also, thank you so much, Petra, for talking about when I went to Amsterdam not too long ago and actually stayed in the neighborhood and got to walk around, and I was like, oh, okay, this is different. It's you could tell it was a new development, so it was really, really fun. So it's kind of cool to have experienced that as you were talking about the projects. And of course, talking about belonging, I work at a place called the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley. We're constantly thinking about the ways in which we define belonging. And I think one of the big things that has come out of that work is really thinking about belonging without creating othering, right? It's always been come from a dichotomous perspective of, you have othering, and those who are not part of the other then must belong, and vice versa. So we think a lot about how are the ways in which belonging can occur without the need to other. And that's a very complicated question. And it's a very complicated, strategy and approach. But to your question about how they all intersect, I think the major critique, for me at least personally, being trained in the US, is that we in the US are trained that urban planners have to be objective. But objectivity doesn't work, in my opinion, because we are not necessarily observers of the built environment. They're also participants in the ecology. So myself as an urban planner, and all of us as urban planners, bring in implicit biases, whether it is the way that we talk about the communities that we design, the way that we serve communities. A lot of the times planners are designing communities they're not even a part of. And so that objectivity and that separation, I think, is what creates the sense of othering, even from the planning process. So for me, what art has taught me, art as an artist, really it's about thinking, what is going on around me? What are the conditions in which I'm a part of? And how do I use art to then replicate or dissect and talk about sort of the things that are going on? So I think as an artist, it's taught me that not only am I an observer, but I'm also the observant, right? There's a different subjectivity that happens when you're doing art as a form of research. And I think that's really allowed me to have that same mentality when I move into the planning world. So I think about, if I'm not the one who comes from these communities, how do I bring other people that are a part of these communities? How do I become the connector? How do I become the liaison? And sometimes a lot, especially in the world of equity, right? Sometimes it means advocating and telling folks like, you need to step back. Like you're talking about design and implementation, but the people that are going to be impacted are not even a part of the conversation. So I call my role the purgatory of power because I do have a lot of power and privilege as an urban planner, and yet I'm not the one experiencing the consequences of a lot of the projects that are designed. So it's ensuring that those who are going to experience those consequences are just as much a part of this process as anyone else.
Yeah, true. Thank you so much. I just wanted to explain a bit before going to the next question, which is more about your research. The way how I knew Jose Richard was that I was attending a conference where they were doing a workshop, and the title of the workshop, because there were a lot of things happening at the same time, I had to choose which of them I wanted to attend, was Planners as Therapists and Cities as Clients. I was like, wow, what is this? And then I attended the workshop, and there I realized about the research project that they have been working on. I know that your research is focused on relationship between the behavior and the built environment and also community engagement. Can you explain a bit more about that? What is the connection there, and how we as urban planners can play a more impactful role in that sense?
Yeah, 100%. I'm a firm believer that I think for urban planning for me is about restoring the sacred relationship between body and earth. And there's so much that has gone into the framing, into the mentalities, and how we have talked about urban planning, right? We continue to only measure, and again, this is coming from a perspective from the US, but we have been trained to measure the success of cities through economic development. Right? So we only measure cities if they're thriving. It's because there's some sort of economic development. Community development, they're always talking about creating more jobs for community. But it's like, no, but the return on equity and the return on investment are not the same. You cannot expect that people's living wages on the 5,000 jobs you created is going to equate the amount of money that developers are getting on this return on investment. Like it just makes no sense. So for me, it's really about how do we restore that sacred relationship when capitalism, in this current iteration of urban planning, at least in the US, has only tethered that relationship. So a lot of the times for me, it's really about thinking about the ways in which trauma plays out in the built environment, right? So if you have people who are from what we considered low income communities, I mean, I was born in the hood, so I definitely, come from with that lived experience. There's always going to be this collective mentality, regardless of where you come from the hood. If you are from the hood, you know how to spot a hood in any other city. And the notion for me that's interesting, well, what about that? What is the common denominator in the hoods that we then recognize, right? And it's also really about understanding that we as bodies have a relationship with the built environment. There's a lot of technologies within our bodies like proprioception, spatial mapping, understanding spatial navigation that has always been about our relationship to the built environment. So really thinking about, for me, the work right now is around creating a lot more cultural strategy and programming around reframing the way that we do urban planning, right? As urban planners, we have been taught to facilitate the transaction of land, but what would happen if we as urban planners became advocates for land or became stewards of land?
Yeah, true. Thank you so much. I guess we will come back to the point that you mentioned about traumas and how cities are creating those traumas for our communities, but later in like 10-15 minutes. Thank you so much for now. I would like to go to Madoka for now. She is a cultural program coordinator at Shibaura House. As I explained previously, Shibaura House is a community hub in Tokyo where they make a lot of different programs and events. And I would like to ask Madoka to explain a bit more about Shibaura House, as we did completely in the first episode. If you would like to know more, you can watch back or check out their website. And then also explain a bit more to give an introduction about one of the current projects that's going on, Moon Kitchen, and then we will watch a video of that. So the floor is yours, Madoka.
Okay, thank you. So I am Madoka from Shibaura House, and I am joining you from Tokyo today. So about Shibaura House, if you saw the first episode, I have explained already, but it's located in the area called Shibaura. It's in Tokyo, and it's the place where those skyscrapers have been developed over the decade. So a lot of people moved in, and it's also office space, office buildings as well. But a lot of residentials has been increased over the years. So a lot of people actually live there and spend their life. But then the problem is they don't really seem to be connected to each other. So they don't know the neighbor's face, or they don't really talk to each other. So Shibaura House was started as a concept of a house of a Shibaura area. So we are hosting numerous events throughout the years with the help of embassies, or with the help of organizations from different countries, or the city governments as well. And we also organize a couple of projects ourselves. And the aim is always about getting people together and connect them for a better future. So today we are going to present our project, one of our current project called Moon Kitchen. It's a project for the local kids and also the parents. So we open up our free space to the children on Mondays. And this was also Monday for me. It's already Tuesday. This is 3 p.m., 3 a.m. I mean in Japan, but we also had events previously today. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to thank you again, while I did before, that every time that Madoka joins us is 3 a.m. in Japan, but she's so flexible that yeah, it's helping us with presenting their projects. Now we can watch the first part of the video. It is a pre-recorded video by the people who are organizers, the Moon Kitchen.
皆さんこんにちは。こんにちは。芝浦ハウスのカフェチューリップで、スタッフをしてます松田です。私は芝浦に住んで12年、10歳の女の子の子供がいます。芝浦ハウスのスタッフのハッチです。今年の4月で3年目になりました。よろしくお願いします。なんか月のキッチンのことを話すっていうことですけど、はい、どんなコンセプトでやってるか。ああ、そうですね。はい。月のキッチンは、みんなで月を見ながら一緒にご飯を食べようというコンセプト。ここから月本当に見えるんです、ね。そう見えるんです。綺麗に見える時があって、子供たちがすごいお喜びするんですけど、っていうので始めて、月曜日の夕方4時から7時の3時間を子どものためのフリースペースという形で、そこで食事も提供させていただいています。無農薬のお野菜、おいしいお野菜を使った食事を子どもには無料で提供していて、で、食事をしなくてもそこの場所を使ってもらって自由に遊んでもらったりとか、あとは宿題をしたい人は宿題をしたりとかという形で、とにかく自由に過ごせる場所をということでやっております。結構小さい子から小学5、6年生まで、いろんな幅広い人たちが来てますね。なのでその小さい子だとその親御さんも一緒に来てくれて、その親御さん同士でまたそこでコミュニティが生まれるというか、知り合ってどんどん輪が広がっていくっていう感じですよね。そう、なんかこのエリアって結構、見てわかる通りすごいビルがこうたくさん建っていて、人は住んではいるんですけどなんか隣に誰が住んでるかわからないとか、なんかそういった課題が多くあって、もちろんなんかそれ以外の課題もたくさんあるんですけど、やっぱりいろんな課題、都市の中における課題っていうのはコミュニティっていうのを軸にして解決していけたりするんじゃないかなっていう思いがあって、その第一歩として芝浦ハウスが子ども食堂月のキッチンをスタートすることになりました。
どんな住んでみてこう変わってることとか、なんかどんなエリアですか？
そうですね、なんか家族ファミリー層がすごく多いっていうのはあって、なので子供も多い方、
増えてるって。
そうどんどん高層マンションがどんどん建っていて、やっぱりいろんなところからここに引っ越してきてっていうので便利もいいし、すごくそういう意味では便利がいいので住みやすいんですけれども、やっぱりさっきハッチが言ったみたいに人とのつながりっていうのがなかなか取りづらい、それぞれが暮らしてるみたいな、そういう場所なので、すごくこう子供も少し大きくなってきたりすると共働き家庭がすごく多いっていう印象があって、なので夕方もしくは遅いと夜8時9時ぐらいまで親御さんが帰ってこない、なのでその時間まで一人でお家で過ごすとかしている子がいるのを時々見かけて、でそういう子たちにご飯どうしてるんだろうなってで聞いてみると、コンビニのご飯を食べているとか、あとはちょっとお菓子でしのいでいたりっていうのを見たこともあるので、そういう子たちの第三の居場所というか、学校と家庭以外の第三の居場所になったらいいなっていう思いも月のキッチンには期待をしています。
Thank you. Yeah, I guess that was one of the examples of community building in one of the most overpopulated cities. I guess Tokyo is probably the most populated city in the world. But we will go back to this example again with Madoka. But I also wanted to ask you, Petra, because while we were discussing about the program and the kind of projects that we wanted to discuss, you brought the example from the garden community that is still in progress. And you also had brought this same experience of eating together to improve the sense of community. Do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, it's a project that we're going to launch July 5th. It's a project by architects, designers, artists, I think they call themselves all. It's a Studio Osiliana. They are from Italy, but it's an international studio, and they studied and are based in Rotterdam. And they will make a temporary garden that will be for approximately or at least 2 years at NDSM. It's going to be an enclosed garden. So it has a sort of fence around it with holes and also peeping holes. I think we have one image from it, a render. So you can actually stand on these sort of casted elements, look in the garden. There's also one sort of circular, circular platform that you can sit on, but are still surrounded by the garden, but not actually inside the garden. And they did that on purpose. So it's actually a design for the plants, basically. And there's also a bird feeder. But it will be opened because we want to create like a sort of gardeners club for neighbors to be able to participate and to work in the garden, and to also open up the garden at those moments for other audiences. We have one wonderful person who will guide the volunteers, and she's been living in Amsterdam for a very long time, comes herself from Iran, and has been doing this whole training at Bloei en Groei, to have these conversations with people, to grow vegetables, grow plants, and have discussions about it. And then through the plants, it goes about their whole lives, basically. And here we want to have like agricultural plants and trees, so you can actually use it, like the willows for making like willow baskets, for instance, but also tea herbs that we're going to have tea sessions with. And then hopefully a lot of people can join to discuss the tea, but maybe also the tea that you drink at home or the food, and then comes with it maybe also migratory stories, because also all the plants that we're going to install have like different backgrounds. A lot of different plants came to Amsterdam also through ships, through NDSM, by accidents. And And we're also going to have like empty spots in the garden so people can also plant their own special plants with it. So it's going to be literally a growing project.
Yeah, true. Speaking of tea, we also in the first episode we had someone to explain a bit more about tea ceremony, which is like a very famous culture tradition, Japanese cultural tradition, where people prepare the tea together and then they drink it together. So it was also as an example of this cultural exploration where we can improve the sense of community or sense of connection at individual level. So if you're interested, you can also watch back that program. But thank you.
And maybe to add to it, because they came to this idea because of the old, you call it in Dutch, Lusthoven. And there were like gardens that like rich Amsterdam people had, in the, especially like 17th century, along the Vecht, along the waters. And they went out there for like clean air, but also to witness and show off their sort of botanical treasures, basically. But they were really closed off for other people. And here they really want to question, like, but what does it mean to have like a public garden? And when is it actually made public? And here it becomes more public when you actually are interested in gardening or, you know, maintaining actually the green instead of money or where you come from.
Yeah, just as Jose Richard was explaining, just the economic development.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I would like to open up the floor if you have any burning question, but later we will also have another Q&A part. But you can also save it for later. But I'm just going to repeat the online Q&A code. You can go to menti.com and insert the code 1655 3865, and I'm going to repeat it, 1655 3865. Do you have any question at this moment? If not, we can also do later. You can also save it. Okay, cool. I want to go back to Jose Richard, and speaking of the traumas that you were explaining, because also in your paper you mentioned that cities are the things that create traumas for communities. So if tonight we are going to discuss how we can improve communities, we need to understand how those traumas are being created by the cities. And the next question, like the follow-up question I will already ask, is how we can heal, how communities can heal from those traumas.
Yeah, 100%. I'm really interested. I guess part of also being an artist is that I was trained as a choreographer and a dancer. And so for me, really, I was interested, and I guess the metaphor I'm always sitting with is, what is the choreography of the city, right? There's something called somatics, and somatics is a field of study and a movement practice, which is all about literally the notion of being inside of your body, right? So while we are all lowercase b bodies, the capital case B body is a sacred relationship that you only have with yourself, right? And being able to build that emotional intelligence also then allows us to be able to feel empathy. So I think the examples that both Mendoza and Petra were speaking about does exactly that, right? In a very big city, it's hard. How do you scale down senses of belonging to what is perceivable to a community? That is through a garden. So you build relationship with plants, and you build this a relationship with the people around you. That is through the projects, you know, the gatherings that are happening, the children's theater, right? So how do you find ways to scale down, particularly, I think, the relationships and the problems that are going on in the city? Particularly in Los Angeles, it's very hard if you tell residents homelessness and houselessness and folks who are experiencing homelessness is a very big issue in Los Angeles. But it's very hard to tell or ask the people of the city to solve the homelessness crisis for a city of 8 million people. How do you fathom that? How do you even conceptualize what that looks like? But can you think about creating strategies when you ask communities, can you take care of the 2 unhoused people on your block? Just the 2. Right? It begins to change the perception of what is possible and what is real. And when we begin to design elements or we begin to design programmings that are actually tangible and implementable, and I learned that in Mexico City. Listen, 22 billion people. How does anything get done here? I'm still trying to figure that out. But I think it's that sense of belonging has to be reduced at a smaller scale that actually feels tangible. And when we're talking about traumas, I mean, there are many ways in which traumas has just impacted communities, particularly here in the U.S. It's been redlining. And for folks who don't know, redlining is a practice that came out of the 40s and 50s in the U.S., where basically maps were created to consider certain communities desirable. And if communities were mostly Black and Brown communities, at that time, mostly Black communities, then they were shaded red because they were seen as less desirable. And this was impacting interest rates on home mortgages. And so what we're seeing now in the US, the housing crisis, is literally 50, 60 years of consequences of a practice of redlining. Because in the US, the fastest way to build wealth is through home equity. And so when you create a system that already disproportionately impacts communities of color, you have spread the wealth in a very disproportionate way here in the US, right? So that's a way in which trauma lives in the built environment. And you constantly also see, particularly as a transportation planner, my background is in working in pedestrian safety. So when we're looking at crashes, I was working on building a diagnosis for what I was calling infrastructural PTSD. And basically using the same criteria that we use to diagnose PTSD on humans, it was then flipping that criteria to then figure out how we can use that way to also diagnose certain criteria, certain neighborhoods, certain streets as causing PTSD. We were looking at, for example, let's say there was a car crash and all of a sudden there's bumpers and other debris from the crash that are left in the city. Those are constant triggers that community has that triggers and says, this is not a safe place to walk through. And then from there, you can also say, let's say that you have 5 crashes that are happening in the same corridor all the time. That's a constant re-exposure to trauma. So as a way, just again, I think that the big question here is not, when I say planners as therapists, like I guess I'm not necessarily asking all planners to be therapists, because not all planners should be therapists. That will cause more harm than good. But rather is to be trauma informed, because there is this relationship in between how the body is socialized by the built environment. The body is an organism of adaptation and evolution. So we're constantly taking in information from the built environment, right? So there's always going to be this relationship. Feedback loops exist in everything that we do. I'm a firm believer of fractal design, right? With our design elements that are the same at every scale, from the microcosm to the macrocosm. And so there's always going to be this relationship there. How do we get to the healing? I think honestly, the first part is really reconciling with the fact trauma has existed in the built environment, right? And there's a whole war going on right now in the name of belonging. The trauma that is about to stay in that community for decades to come, centuries to come, is unthinkable. And what we're experiencing and what we're seeing, let me be hella real, urban planning is a project of settler colonialism, and more urban planners need to be outraged about what is happening, because what we're experiencing and witnessing is a violent extreme of gentrification. That's all it is. So that is a prime example of how violence and trauma is going to live in the built environment. How do we get to the healing? I think, again, is recognizing and reconciling with the fact that we have caused trauma. Second, creating it and bringing more, I think, restorative justice approaches to the work. Restorative justice quickly is about just acknowledging that harm was committed. Folks who have enacted harm and folks who have received the harm come together to talk about the impact of the harm without necessarily blaming people, but it's really understanding the why. And I think also transformative justice is important. We need to be okay with transforming ourselves and be like, sometimes they're going to get this wrong, right? I think coming, especially from an urban planning perspective and being in government bodies, listen, when you work for a city, you also acquire city baggage. And it may not be our baggage, but I think being transparent about it is definitely a step to just getting to have communities trust a little bit more and then be able to co-create more. So
Yeah,
just some
indeed.
things out there.
True.
A lot.
No, thank you. That was very relevant, and I guess part of the process that you were explaining about, like recognizing the trauma and then also being trauma informed. I guess part of it somewhere probably in between is also acknowledging, because even recognizing without acknowledging it is also another problem. And we've seen in a lot of different examples that by not acknowledging how these traumas by cities are being created, we are not able to heal the communities that we want to make them improved in a way. Speaking of healing, I guess probably the kind of works that Petra and her team are doing at NDSM, and we've seen the projects are there. But I want to ask this question: that in your opinion, how do you think we can use art in the most general sense, but also art installation, either with the people or just like art in public spaces, can be used as a way to connect communities? What are your insights on that? How we can use it, or yeah.
Yeah, I think I want to agree that it's hard to say like, okay, art's gonna solve like all these issues, you know, for like a dense city. So even if you are speaking on like a small scale, it's difficult to say that out loud. Although, I mean, you know, this is an example of like a kinder atelier, like a child's workshop. That's also like a really small scale working, but speaking about this trauma still, like I think NDSM also needs to work with these traumas in a way that we try to sort of deal with in different ways by asking all these different artists with different backgrounds in different ways, in different manners, different strategies. I mean, you have the former employees, and it got bankrupt, so there was a lot of unemployment because of that. But they still see like NDSM as this sort of holy ground in a way, because it was so big and huge, and everybody knew it at the time, and so there's a lot of trauma going on there. There were a lot of migrant workers who were not you know, done justice to as they should be. There were separate living barracks for them. They were not allowed to do what they ever wanted to do in living. They had to sort of live according to a certain rules. After that, there were like a lot of sewing studios with women from migrant workers working there. We also asked an artist, a Turkish artist, and she made a whole portrait with these artists and their sort of intergenerational traumas about women and working and not being recognized for their work. And then artists came, and they also feel now that, yeah, that they don't get enough justice for their terrain. So everybody tries to own the space, to claim it in a way. And that's also why we, with Morak Majersko, one of the outcomes of the workshops was the leave space for space. Because it's also, you know, you cannot give it to a certain group and then it's lost. So we also try to work in a sort of, we have to work in a temporary way. So we have to work with temporary projects, which is a downside. On the other hand, we can also use it in different ways, connect different communities. Afaina de Jong, we want to create like a library with her next year. And she was also in a program here that we organized with Pakhuis de Zwijger. And she also said, like Jose Richard also said, like, you cannot design in a generic way. It has to be specific to resonate with certain audiences. We also installed now a basketball court, which is a 3x3, which is a special street urban style basketball court, together with 3x3 Unites, which is this organization, and they have like special leadership programs for young people through basketball to keep them off the streets and to really, make a community with them. And they will organize like matches and events at NDSM. So we also use other organizations because they have the knowledge and the access to communities. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. That was so nice to know more about the projects. I also wanted to ask Jose Richard about one of their current work or projects. When we were discussing before the program, you told me about the radical imagination for radical justice. But if there are any other examples that you would like to bring, because I know that's also one of the examples of the community improvement projects that you're part of. Would you like to give us a bit more info about that as, like, let's say, a successful example or something?
100%. The contract is on radical imagination, and radical imagination is a concept that has existed for a while already. But I think right now at the Institute, we're getting ready to do a research group to kind of define different approaches to radical imagination and hopefully build a toolkit. So hopefully that's going to be published in next year. But the concept of radical imagination, truly, I think also I'm trained as an organizer. And as an organizer, we are constantly taught to know how to deconstruct systems and be critical of systems. And I think a lot of that are also just projections of trauma. Those are trauma responses. So that's the thing about me being a social worker. I'm always going to say trauma. Everything is trauma. Even the partners that I've dated are all trauma. But it's conversation that we don't give enough space to also imagine the world that we want to create. It's just as important. And sometimes when you're working with communities that have been impacted by a lot of trauma, survival is always at the forefront. And so there is no space to imagine. So it's thinking about how do we bring in, of course, the arts come in and are very helpful in this way to build that relationship to imagination, because we also have to be mindful that the world that we're living in now was someone's imagination. Someone decided that we were going to, like, live in the world that we're living in now. Some group of people imagined this the world to be. So imagination is also very powerful, right? And speaking about somatics, imagination forms perception, and perception also forms reality. So I think that's an important relationship to understand. Right now we're working in Puerto Rico. And in Puerto Rico, there is a lot of displacement that is happening in the city because of the policies that the U.S. has implemented on the island. And the island is a territory of the U.S., so it's very modern day colonialism that is happening on the island. And also because of the impacts of the natural disasters that have impacted the island over the last couple of years, there has been a huge exodus of the island. So there are a lot of schools that are abandoned because there are the population of children has just dropped on the island. So now with these abandoned schools, there's a lot of community members that are occupying these schools, convert them into community centers for those folks who are still on the island. So most of our job is helping create activities that get us to think about radical imagination to continue to build a sense of community. So in one of the communities that I'm working in now, it's called Torreon Bajo. There are 7 different little sectors on the island in this community, and they all kind of, there's like some tensions going on, and there's like some little beef, just, and when we were having this conversation, we realized that it comes from a couple of places, right? In the moment of emergency crisis, we know that people just begin to respond and huddle at a very small scale. COVID taught us that. Hurricane Katrina has taught us that. But again, we begin to take care of only your family, or the bubbles just gets really, really small. So when the island has been constantly impacted by hurricanes and natural disasters, the sense of scale and urgency gets very, very small. So it's kind of hard to think about a collective aid for the island, but can you think about it again for your community? So we realize that there's a lot of those different type of tensions that exist around the island. So we're figuring out ways to build coalitions among different parts of the island to restore those relationships. But in this project, we realized that these little conversations and tensions and little chismes, gossips, really felt like those kind of fights you have with siblings. Like, I felt like just the type of fight you have with your sister or your brother, like, they're annoying, but we're all Puerto Rican at the end of the day, something like that. So the conversation came up to be, I was like, This feels like a children's book called The Sisters of Torreon Bajo. Just like a bunch of sisters getting at the dinner table and just having these bickering fights. So that's kind of what we got to. And then the community realized, and again, these were all sort of listening sessions and facilitated conversations with the community. They kept telling us about very local characters on the island. Just everybody knew, you know, so and so who was somebody's tia. She would walk down the block with this hat and it had this very, you know, particular feather. And all of these characters just started coming out from conversations that we were hearing. So we decided that maybe we needed to capture that story. That yes, the conversation is still about anti-displacement work, but we needed to meet the community where they were at that moment, which is about creating a sense of belonging, highlighting these histories, and really talking about them. And so right now, we have partnered, folks on the island have partnered with a local collective of artists who are going to be creating these portraits of these characters of that community. And what comes along with it is a docu-series documenting the history of this particular neighborhood. And also right now there's conversations of partnering with the tourist community there. So when tourists are coming, like they have a sense of community of being like, folks have lived here before you're trying to buy this house by the beach. So just know that. So it's again about bringing visibility, about bringing a sense of belonging and community, also while thinking about the bigger concepts and impacts of gentrification. The cultural strategy, I think, happens in tandem.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. When you were discussing about like these tensions and the conflict, first I want to refer to one of our previous programs. We had a fellowship with Roberto Rocco, who is professor of spatial planning at TU Delft. And through that fellowship, there was one specific program that the title was Naked Conflict. And through that program, we discussed what Jose Richard was referring to in detail. So if you're interested, you can watch back that program. But also going back to the point that you mentioned about conflicts, tension, all of these discussions, and generally the challenges of these kind of projects, I would like to ask you, Petra, because you have done a lot of different projects and you have been working with communities a lot. What do you think are the most important challenges and how we can deal with them in order to get what we want out of communities and improving that sense that we are looking forward?
Yeah, maybe to add still to this wonderful example of him, because Afaina actually also with this library wants to bring together like all these different oral histories from all the different histories from and about NDSM, to bring it all together and make it into a sort of spatial installation, and also bringing together music from the margins to the center. So it's actually about all the stories that are not so central in a library with all the colonial ideas behind it, to make like a new sort of local library, and that it can also go to other places and have a local sort of context over there. So I thought that was a nice addition to his story now.
Yeah, sure.
About the challenges, I think, yeah, what helps, of course, is to have like a big network, and we with 3 colleagues are working and living in the same area, so that helps. I think one of the challenges is how to try to reach out and get access to people that are really far away from your own sort of bubbles, because through people you get to know like a lot of people, but still there are a lot of people that you vaguely have access to. So we actually start flyering and like old school things, thinking about language, for instance. Also the Dutch workshop leader, for instance, was really important, because people from Tuindorp Ozaan, who were a bit older, they didn't speak English, or they didn't want to speak English. They just, didn't want to. So that was also an important lesson. What language are you using in inviting people? So at one point we thought, oh, it's a creative workshop. And then we thought, oh, but maybe people expect too much of it to be, that they actually had to be creative. So it's also about expectation management and what can they expect, and also what their efforts, what relation is there going to be with the output, with the installation. The challenge, for the last workshop for Morak Majesco, we had a workshop space at NDSM. But before, with the Tower of Babel, we had different workshops, different artists, and they went most of the time to the locations, which was really a barrier lowering thing.
Sorry to interrupt. Tower of Babel was another project that you were.
You see it here back there with all different inputs from different communities. So. For instance, with people from Suriname, indigenous people, to people from a mosque at NDSM. All different kinds of communities. And the difference with Morak was that here it was the communities among themselves, which was brought together in the installation, and they came together for the opening and got to see and hear each other. But with Morak, we really tried to bring them together and to have this actual dialogue, which was also really worthwhile. So the different artists have like different strategies and different tactics that we try to accommodate as best as possible. Then time is also, you need to have quite a lot of time. And then sort of trying to be sustainable is still a challenge for us, because we cannot have the projects on for a very long time. This was on for like a year, almost. That's the longest, and the garden is going to be on for 2 years. So that's going to be then the longest. But still, that's also a challenge, as well as a advantage that we can get to know like more and more people and more communities.
Cool.
And I think that in the end, it's also really about who do you invite, which artist. That's really a matter, like how involved and how sort of capable are they in connecting to audiences. And then, who do you invite? And if you invite the people whom you can invite, then who is being heard a lot, and how to also sort of lower the sort of really loud voices. And that's then also the quality of the workshop leader often, to sort of balance that out and to also give voice to the more silent voices.
A lot of times we end up with either overheard voices or unheard voices, so it's like hard to get the average voice. But that was a good example to make what we were discussing previously more clear. Thank you so much. As I see the red time, I wanted to ask a question from Madoka here, but I would skip it because we are running a bit of out of time. And now we can watch the second part of the Moon Kitchen project that we watched the first part before, which is more about like the kind of values that they're standing for. And later we can discuss it more together with like if you have questions or if you have comments. So we can have a look at the video.
なんか最近というか、スタートしたのが去年の10月とかからなったと思うんですけど、そうだけどなんかこうだんだん運営側のスタッフもこうスムーズにできるようになってきたっていうのもあって、最近その英語のワークショップとか、あとはダンス、体を動かすようなワークショップ、それすごく良いね。そうでなんかそれも自然発生的にというか、なんかあんまり無理のない範囲でスタートして続けているような状態で、なんかそういう子どもたちにとってご飯を食べるだけとか、各自、ね、ゲームやったり宿題したりみたいなことだけじゃなくて、何かこう文化的なことを学べたりとか、なんかその学習としての学習っていうか、なんか知識としての学習だけじゃなくて、それ以外でこうコミュニケーション取ることとか、なんかみんなでこう輪になることとか、 なんかそういう経験を通しての学びみたいなのを得られる場所であるっていうのはやっぱり芝浦ハウスだからこそできることだし、まあ、今はまだできてないけど、なんかもうちょっとこう大々的に、こう外部の人を連れてきてワークショップとかイベントができると、本当にこう芝浦ハウスがこれまで培ってきたネットワークとかコミュニティを生かした場所としてなんか生かせていけるんじゃないかなっていうのは思ってて、なんかその辺となんか子供とか大人とかあまり関係なく、
そうですね、
ありたいように入れる場所として、
確かにその感じがなんかできてっていいなって思ってて、まあちょっとねあれですけど、なんか地域がやっぱりそういうこう独特ななんか中学受験をこうする子が多くて、小学校の高学年になってくると大体の子がこう塾に行き始めたりっていうことですごくこうなんだろうな、子どもたちが勉強することに必死になっているっていう、なんかそういう地域だなって、勉強をいっぱいすることがなんか良いことみたいな、それだけが良いことみたいになってしまってるところもあるので、それをこうなんかちょっとそこに風穴を開けるっていうのはオーバーかもしれないけど、そういう子たちもこう一緒になってそうやって体を動かしたりすることで、あとまあそこに集ってくれることで、そこに子どもたちの親御さんが来ていたりとか、あとはまあこういうスタッフがいたりとかするんですけど、そういうこうみんなでこう地域の子どもたちを見守りながら育てるまでいくようなね、そんな偉そうなことは言えないんですが、でもそうやってこう地域でつながりながら何気ない会話の中で子どもたちを見守り育てるじゃないですけど、まあお互いなんですけどね、お互いも育っていくというかあるとは思うんですけど、そういうこう地域で子どもを見守るっていうのがなんか昔から日本の文化だったけど、そういうのがなかなか今なくなってしまって、人の家の子はもう関係ないみたいな、なんか自分家の子だけ良ければいいみたいな、ね、風潮がどうしてもこう出てきてしまうので、なんかそういうのをこう取っ払って、まあ、全部コミュニティを作っていくことから始まるんだと思うんですけど、そういうことがこうできつつあるのかなって思っています。はい。
Yeah. Thank you so much to the Shibaura House team for making the video. No time to lose. I would like to quickly invite Madoka to present the Alive project that at the beginning of the program I gave a bit of introduction about it. As I mentioned, Alive, first of all, it's based in Taipei, Taiwan, and they're a service provider for a variety of lifestyle solutions. And they said that their goal is that everyone should enjoy their lifestyle as they want through multiple forms of living spaces, such as residential, industrial, and work. Through the visuals, we can see what they mean. But Madoka is presenting on behalf of Alive because Shibaura House and Alive are partnering with each other on a lot of different projects. So please, you can start, Madoka.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to introduce about Alive today, but before we begin, I'd like to clarify why we are presenting Alive in this program. So the next slide, please. So we've been working with Justin, who's the CEO of Alive, for the past 10 years, and he's based in Taipei. And we've been exchanging ideas of how we can improve the urban space, what we can do as a community, what we can do from our perspective to the society in Taipei and Tokyo, because it's quite similar. So the next slide. So Justin Yu, he's a CEO, as I mentioned, but he is always working for designing urban life in more sustainable ways. So in that way, it's very relatable to this program as it's dealing with the regenerative design. So you can see how the urban life could be designed in regenerative way in the context context of Taipei today. So the next slide, please. So the map shows Taipei here, and it's about 3 hours flight from Japan. And this is the basic context of Taiwan right now. So it's quite similar to the Netherlands probably, and also to Tokyo. So the country is quite urbanized, and 70% of the people lives in the city. So in these city areas, it's very similar to Amsterdam. People just go there, and the place is so densified, and the real estate price, of course, has risen. So it's getting harder and harder to live there. So you can see Taipei as a very much typical example of density that we are talking about today. So I'd like to introduce briefly what Justin was doing before A-Life. He started a project called Park Up, and it is a project asked by the Taipei city government. And the next slide shows the situation of Taipei back then. So we need free space to live a healthy life, basically. And WHO says, as you can see, we need at least 9 square meters of the free space to live very healthy way. But Taipei only has 5.32. And on the other hand, you can see on the left, so the map shows how many idle space they have in Taipei City. So the government asked to utilize those idle space and create some free space for the public. So Park Up is a project which is planning for a small idle space, which is under 165 square meters. And it's adapting the concept of inclusive design, and it's localized. It's aimed to be localized to the citizens. So you can see the picture of an idle space. This is one example. And the next one is the concept, how it's going to be utilized. And this is how it's implemented. So as you can see, Justin has been thinking about how people can live better in urban space. And he decided to create some comprehensive, very complete system where people can live in a better way. So this is the basic idea of what he is doing. So he took housing as a space to put sustainable thinking to action. So A-Life was based on those concepts, and it is a lifestyle brand, as Faisal mentioned, and it's not just a residence, but it has many other functions, as I will be explaining. So A-Life thinks space is the container of life. So it's, as you can see in the picture, it's not just a kitchen and living space, but it also has a working space and also event space, as well as the commercial spaces as well. And what he's doing right now, what he's thinking behind, is that to create this lifestyle ecosystem. So he creates this residential space and also the commercial space and all the factors that could lead to a new lifestyle that could lead to a more sustainable living. So to simplify this idea, they have this residential space and commercial space and workspace. So I brought one example. This is one of the buildings that they own. It's called A-Life FL. It's in Taipei City. So on the 2nd to the 8th floor, they have the residential space with a co-working space and also the co-kitchen where people can live together. And in the 1st floor, they have this cafe, which is operated quite sustainably. So, and residents can actually order a cup of coffee every day for free. And they also have this event space where people can be connected together. And right now, Shibaura House is exhibiting one exhibition right there. So the next slide, please. So what they're doing here is taking a space as a proposal for a new lifestyle, as I mentioned. And the next slide, please. So this is the vision for 2026. What they're doing right now is to try to expand this network, the ecosystem, as they say, by expanding the brands, creating numerous brands that's sustainably operated. Next one, please. So those are the brands right now they have, such as cleaning operation system or bubble tea shops. And what they're doing here also is about proposing alternative business that could lead to a new way of living. So the next one, please. So they have more than 25 units around the world. And next slide shows the map of where it is. And we are also part of the map as well as Shibaura House. And it's expanding the network, the ecosystem all over the world right now. So to summarize very briefly, what they're doing with this project is to take this business as an opportunity to reshape the urban landscape and the lifestyle with the next generation. So I mentioned very briefly about A Life today. Next slide, please. So it is the ecosystem that they're trying to create. So if you ever want to know more about the project or probably collaborate in some ideas, they will be very open. So they can you can check their website as well. And yes, I think we're running short of time, so I'll
Thank you so much. Yeah, we have put also like their website. It's alife.cc. If anyone interested, they can reach out to them. Thank you so much for the presentation. For me, like the final slide was like a bit overwhelming, because when we're talking about like overpopulated cities and with all of those connections and this network, it's still too much to see how we're going to simplify it. But thank you. That was like a good example of how we can, like in a city like Taipei, that's like, as you were explaining, per person, the free space is how small it is, how we can improve that connection and that sense of community. I would like to open the floor for any potential question or comments, also for online people who are watching us. If you have any questions, you can insert the code 16553865 into menti.com. And for people in the room, there will be only like a few minutes. If you have any questions or if you would like to add any comments, I will directly look into your eyes so you feel that you have to say something. You're a group of students. You might have some questions and inspiration for your thesis, maybe. Yeah, there is a question here. My colleague is coming to you with the mic. Can you just wait for a sec?
Hello. Yeah, it's working. I have a question for Petra, because you were talking a bit about investing in communities and working with artists, collaborating with communities. I work at Raum. We have a little bit of the same experiences in Utrecht. But we also experience that art can also be something for the privileged, so to say. So we're also investing, I think, the last couple of years more into really community managing from within the organization as well. So I was wondering how is NDSM working in that way, and how is it connected to the rest of Amsterdam Noord?
Yeah, I think we, as you can see in all the slides, that we try to work in different ways on different levels. And yeah, for the privileged, I think that a lot of works that we show actually offer something on different levels for different audiences. So you can look at it like Morak's work on a sort of deeper level, but you can also just sit in it and enjoy it and just read the lines. And I think that goes for a lot of works that we present. Yeah, and of course also some works cause friction. I mean, there was one work that I was explaining, the video from Blijf, and she was interviewing all the Turkish migrant workers. And then we got one comment from one woman living in the new apartment buildings, and she was really frustrated that the woman in the video didn't speak Dutch, even though it was like, you know, a second generation Turkish women. And then, yeah, I answered like really politely that, yeah, what can you say about that? Maybe it was because the interviewer, the woman, is Turkish and her Dutch is not good and she's only living there for a couple of years. I mean, yeah, it's also interesting, I think, to cause that friction for maybe a person that you think, because I also looked her up, and then she turned out to be a director of this vaping company. And I was like, okay, who are you to have this comment? And yeah, how can you even speak then about sort of privilege and yeah, I find it difficult to speak about it in that sense, in like what is privilege for whom and
privilege might be a big word, so to say, and I think art is still and always will be relevant, especially in public space as well, because it can confront and it can cause friction. Yeah, what I was. You talked a little bit earlier about investing in a community by handing out flyers, for example, in the neighborhood surrounding you. My experience is working with community is also investing a lot of time, like just having cups of coffee with people living around. And yeah, flyers, for example, can also still keep the distance between you as an organization and the rest of the neighborhood.
Yeah, but then, for instance, the flyers we use to get in contact with these persons, and then you can have coffee and have the workshops. But first, you have to get to know them, and yeah, are you gonna
inform them?
How otherwise are you gonna get these coffees? So the coffee is easy to do when people are approaching you, which is already like, you know, a privilege if they approach you, and if you know them through other people or from schools or things like that. But if you really don't know people that you want to connect to, then an old school flyer is actually, in our experience, a pretty good. And it's not like the ideal, because you spread like maybe 500 or 1,000 and then maybe 10 people show up. But it's still worthwhile, I think, to get those 10 people. It's really hard to get otherwise. So I think it's really a mixture of all these different kinds of strategies. And of course, I mean, we had a co-creation project with a school nearby with Jasser Ballemans. It's also in there, I think, with the clouds, Wolkenpoort. And then we just contact the director. But that's really easy because then, you know, it's the director, you go to the website, you call them, you have different appointments with them. And then it's so much easier to make like this connection. And then to go further and have like whole school kids groups and the teachers involved. And then it's kind of easy because you have somewhere to tap in. But what do you do with sort of this anonymous inhabitants? Yeah, that's, I think, still a challenge and a struggle.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm afraid that we don't have space for more questions. I was pushing you to ask questions, but you can continue the conversation after we end, because I want to stick to the timing of the program, because we have a lot of live audiences as well. Very, very short to Jose, Richard, and Petra. If there is one sentence as a wrap-up sentence or as a final sentence, if you would like to share with people who are listening or people who are here, like a final thing. Is there anything that you would like to share?
Yeah, actually, to the question that was just being had, I think particularly also when you're working with artists need to let go of their ego. If you are working in community, then the art no longer belongs to you. It belongs to the community. So
Yeah.
sometimes we as artists also have to change our ego to the side and say that when you're talking about art, it's a process, not the product, right? So we're not interested necessarily in art in urban planning, but what is the art of urban planning? So just to look to that.
Perfect.
What I would say, I think it's just, again, we are all participants in this ecology. I think we all need to start thinking about how do we also infuse care in the work that we're doing. I think that was a lot of the themes in the projects today. Yeah, how do we infuse care? And again, how do we remind ourselves that we are planning for dystopian futures? So I think it's always something to keep in mind.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining all the way from Mexico, and thank you, Madoka, for joining us from Japan with 3 a.m. timing and not having your sweetest sleep. If there is any last word that you would like to share, Petra, just one sentence.
Yeah, I think we try to leave space for space, and claiming space means also including but also excluding others. And I think that's always a challenge, and we try to overcome it by having temporary projects, but of course that's also only one solution, and we still have this free space of 10 acres, which is kind of a luxury. And we try to not to prevail like certain histories or certain communities, but to have like a complex stack of layers and layered stories.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for people who are watching online. Thank you for people here participating. I want to thank Shibaura House and Madoka and our great speakers. Stay tuned, because next week we have the program, a DCFA special, which is not part of the current fellowship, but just a one-off program about, as we discussed, belonging a lot. It's going to be a bit more deep conversation about the living experience of first-generation migrants, non-Dutch people, of course. And it's titled Voices of Unheard, Designing Belonging. So if you're free and if you're interested, you can watch online or join us here at Podcast de Zwijger. So June 3rd, you can mark your calendar. Also, the last and final episode of the fellowship with Shibaura House, Redesigning Connection. It's going to happen again on Monday, 21st of June, and it's called More Than Cities. So we are going to discuss how we can design or redesign this connection with other cities as well. You can become a friend of Podcast de Zwijger. We are a nonprofit organization, and all the programs are free of charge. If you like, you can pay as you wish. And thank you for watching. For more information, you can check dezwijger.nl. Have a good evening.